I don't hear an echo right now. Oh, we are live. And hello, Julia.
Hi, Aya. How are you doing this morning? It's not evening. I'm sorry. How are you?
Yeah, this afternoon I am fine, trying to keep up with everything. This is my day to be out and about, so I'm kind of thinking about a million different things at the same time because I have to get it all done.
Nice. So, does that mean like Bo has
Jessica?
Yeah, that's nice. I always like hearing. By the way, I wanted to comment that I watched your video on how to make a fire, or you making a fire, and I thought it was really interesting. I really liked it.
Well, thank you. I was inspired by this Chinese lady whose videos I've been watching, and I realized I don't need a whole film crew in order to do something like that. So
definitely not. And what I really liked was you were using like sticks and things that you found around your properties, which is kind of like what we used to do too. Like when we made a fire, sometimes we chop the firewood, but sometimes we just find little sticks like to add into it because it would give it a nice scent. Like if you had some cedars, like branches or something, it would make the fire very fragrant. I liked that.
it does smell good. I mean, I'm not saying I got it going that well because actually those branches were soaked, because we'd had a lot of rain. But it was still fun. And I don't know if you noticed, but Bo does not like fire. So at one point he closed himself off. He went back in and he closed the glass door, and I had to ask him to open it for me.
He just doesn't. Maybe is it the noise that the fire makes or the visual aspect of it, do you think? Like, what is it?
I think he's cautious of fire, which is a good thing. We should all be cautious.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. My cat, Irina, is acting very strange too. I thought about taking her to the vet because we had thunder the other day. I didn't hear the thunder. I don't know. I guess because I was at work and I didn't hear it, but everybody mentioned it. And now she's hiding again. Like she does this sometimes, but she won't come out of the laundry room.
Oh, yeah. Well, Leo doesn't like strange men. So when we were having work done on the telephone, he was hiding.
Oh, poor Leo.
But I mean, he can be very friendly if he knows somebody, but he's especially cautious of men. And you would think, maybe something happened to him, but I know him since he was a very small puppy. So I know nothing happened to him, but he still has this sort of phobia of men that he does not know.
Well, that makes sense. Maybe he's just being protective of the property because he thinks like something could happen. I don't know. Like he just wants to protect you guys. Like I know our dog was like that too. Like he just didn't like if anybody got too close to the fence, he would bark. And he had a very loud bark. He wasn't mean or anything. He just was very protective of people coming too close to our property.
Well, I hate to tell you this, but Leo is kind of a wimp. So here's what he does. I mean, when somebody comes that he knows and likes, he will wag his tail but also be barking if they're on the other side of the fence. But if somebody that he totally does not know, and especially a man, and especially a tall man that he does not know, he will actually hide out and not bark. So,
oh, poor Leo. Maybe he's, my cat, yeah.
It's not like anything ever happened to him because we know nothing has, but
I guess it's just how his personality maybe. Like my cat, nothing's happened to her, but she'll hide for a couple of days. I don't know why. I can't explain why. Like, why is she hiding? Like, oh well.
Right.
So anyway, you've been watching like some shows I know on Netflix and things, and I know I haven't got around to watching the show, but did you want to share anything about it at all yet, or do you want to wait until?
Well, have we shared this on this live?
Yeah, we may have talked about it, but honestly, like I don't know, like maybe other people haven't heard about it. It doesn't hurt to just say a little bit about it, like now, like that you've seen more of it without giving away the.
It's called A Love So Beautiful, and I'm almost afraid to tell people I'm watching it because it's really for teenagers. It's not for somebody in my age category, but it's just about a girl who has a crush on a boy. It starts out in high school, but it keeps going, and I'm by now, I don't think I'm giving anything away, but she's graduated from college. He's a doctor, you know, so it's gone, you know, a long, long way. But it starts out basically as a teen romance.
Oh, that's kind of nice. And I don't think that that necessarily means that it's out of your age category, because a lot of people that I know or talk to, they like to read classics. And a lot of the classics, like, well, what about Gone with the Wind or Wuthering Heights? Like, look at the age of the characters in those stories. They were quite young compared to people nowadays, because life expectancy wasn't as long. And at the end of Gone with the Wind, did you know that Scarlett O'Hara was only 28 years old?
No, I really hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, so I guess, hey, like, it's an entertaining show, and it doesn't have to always be a serious one to watch it sometimes. Like, oh, sorry. But anyway, I don't know. Maybe there's something that's just charming to watch about it.
It is charming. I think there's something about Eastern views of teen romance. They're so much more charming than what we have in the West, because, you know, it's really not overtly sexual at all. It's just very, and they're way past the age at which, you know, American children are already groping each other, but it's really not like that. And it's so innocent, you know, the love, and so intense.
You know, I kind of like that though, because I feel like, okay, I don't have anything against, like, if people want to have certain kind of relationship, but I think like this is a problem kind of like in the viewpoints that men and women have in Western dating in a way, because they start dating way too young. I don't want to sound like a prude, but I think 13, 14, that's just too young. And then you start having these expectations that you're going to have like these really serious relationships when you're supposed to be in school or just being a kid. And I feel like this, like the Asian mindset, it seems a little bit healthier. Like they just let it happen, and it's like love, like an actual kind of love, as opposed to maybe like a lustful kind of yearning. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. Yeah. It seems nice.
Yeah. And apparently, although this series doesn't start in kindergarten, they know each other. They have known each other all their lives, and they live close to each other, you know, in the same building, you know, which is divided into two parts. And so they know each other really, really well.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that a good thing though? Like people don't really know each other anymore sometimes. Like I just like the idea of knowing somebody and getting to know them, and where it could just be a natural progression instead of, I don't know. Well, like, let's just say like the standard American romantic movie, like it's very intense and it has to be very grandiose, but this sounds like it's just more like a natural progression.
Well, yeah, of course it's got the usual thing where he's more aloof and she's more open.
Mm-hmm. That's fine. You know, that happens because in every relationship there's usually a person that's more aloof, more open, opposites attract kind of thing.
Right, exactly. So I really recommend that show. I don't want to talk about it any more than that right now, but I would like to talk to you about it after you've seen it.
I want to watch it. So anyway, there's also kind of interesting. Somebody told me about this movie. I'm going to watch it and maybe I'll just share my thoughts about it with you. It's a costume period piece, but I've heard it's very unusual. I just kind of want to share it with you. I had the movie and I forgot to bring it home, but I'm going to watch it as well because I'm just curious, like, how do they bring the history in since it's a costume period piece? So I might watch that and share that as well. But I am reading a book and I've read more of it because usually I used to try to rush through books, but if I don't have a lot of time, I'm just taking my time to really digest this book called The Wind in My Hair, because it's kind of, it's this woman's memoir, but it's not just like an easy read. It's not like something you can just sit down and just like read, because I feel like you kind of have to really digest the story because it goes through so many different parts of her life. Like first she's growing up in Iran, but she doesn't agree with like the things that men are telling her, like you have to cover your hair, which I think is really interesting because they always tell us, well, if you grow up in an oppressive culture, everybody's just going to be subjugated, but not her. Like she didn't like, well, for instance, that some little boys were making fun of, I think it might be her stepfather. I don't really understand the relationship. I'd have to go back and read it. So she kind of taunted him, but instead of her stepfather being proud of her for like sticking up for him, he scolded her, but she just felt that way on her own, which I think is interesting because they always say, well, if people grow up in oppressive cultures, nobody's ever going to speak up. But they do actually, and that's not true. Like in Iran, people all the time are speaking up. They're speaking out more than people think. Like what people think they know about Iran is really not complete, because we see like the state propaganda, right? We see like the Islamic Republic, but like one thing about Iran, did you know like they're the least religious Muslim country in the Middle East because of that government?
That makes them the least religious? How do you mean that?
Okay, so anyway, this is just what, maybe there are very religious people in the government in the country, but a lot of the people question the government because they really hate
Islam. Sure, of course.
Yeah. So they're saying like people used to be more fastidious about like, let's say Ramadan before the Islamic Republic came around. And they say actually this regime, like forcing the hijab on women, has made people less observant of certain parts of Islam because of the government like telling them that they need, with the young people, maybe not with everybody, but there is a growing segment of the young population. They don't like that they have to live their life this way. They don't like that they are having to cover their hair, but we don't really talk about that in the media. We just talk about, oh, well, everybody feels this way. But there are people, maybe it's not everybody, but there are people who do question the government. It's just, it's not going to happen a lot because with this woman, Mashi, she went to prison because all they were doing was they were writing a paper in high school, like kind of questioning things about the government. And she went to prison for like 90 days and she's lucky that she got out. And the strange thing when she was in prison as a high school student was, okay, they want men and women to be separated, but she found out like they were sharing the same shower. And she thought, well, that's really strange. They want men and women to be completely separated in this culture. But in the prison, she said she had to wash down the shower stall because they were having them share the same like showering facility. And she just thought that was kind of strange. That was one of her observations. And then later on, like, she didn't want to be married. Like her mom said that she needed to be married, but she had to marry the guy that she had the romance with because they had a child together. But he wasn't very nice to her. And then her mom was suggesting to him, oh, well, you could have 2 wives. And she didn't really want that. He decided that he wasn't going to anyway because the new woman he met didn't want to have 2 wives. So she ended up just being single in Iran. And there's actually what a lot of people don't know about Iran. There are a lot of single women who choose not to get married because they just want to have some autonomy. So yeah, they have to wear the headscarf. They have to observe these rules, but not everybody agrees with it. And more recently, like with her and others, they have this movement called My Stealthy Freedom, where women will go to different sites, like official sites, and they will take off their headscarf and they'll post pictures of it on social media. And it's very dangerous. But people are becoming fed up at this point, and they're just not wanting to always go along with everything that the government tells them that they have to do. So for her, because she had been in prison, she wasn't allowed to study in Iran. She couldn't get a degree. She basically did have to leave the country because she kept writing things that was protesting the government. But this is what I thought was interesting about her. She never finished high school. She didn't have a college degree, but she was writing articles and doing quite well. And she's like, oh, I don't have an education. But I thought that was kind of fascinating that she was self-motivated to teach herself to be a journalist despite all these things. Like she really pushed herself to do these things on her own. I just thought that was kind of fascinating about the story. And she eventually did go to school and get her degree, but she wasn't allowed to do it in Iran. So she's living in England and then later in America. And it's kind of an interesting story because she'll write things about how Orwellian the Iranian government is. Because I don't want to give too much away, but I probably am. So basically when she started criticizing, she started calling different government leaders on their cell phone and asking them, why are you killing like because in 2009, I don't know if you remember, but Ahmadinejad wasn't the most popular candidate. There were other people like Musavi and a couple of others. And she would call these officials and ask what happened to these people who protested against them. Some people ended up dead. So the Iranian government ran a news story about her that was really horrific. They said that she'd been raped in the streets of London by bandits, and that her son was receiving psychiatric treatment. And at first she was really upset about it, but then she started dissecting the story. She goes, wait a minute, there haven't been any bandits in England since, like, you know, the Middle Ages. Like, there's thugs, but not bandits. And she was just saying how Orwellian in 1984 the Iranian government is, that they try to discredit anybody questioning them by like saying, oh, all these things. She was just showing the absurdity. But my only critique of the book, I guess, is I understand that when people might leave these countries that they go into certain academic circles, but I don't understand why it always has to be a liberal one. I don't think that necessarily we're always the best too. Like, okay, I know Iran can be Orwellian in their state propaganda, but does that mean that in the US or the UK that we're perfect and we don't have like some censorship too? I mean, that's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well, it's certainly very hard to get completely unbiased coverage of anything. So obviously we're not completely unbiased in our media coverage of what's going on.
Yeah, that's just my only point about that. But I don't know. The book is interesting. I guess it just shows another side to Iran, because everything that people see, and I've known about this for a long time, because I don't know why I find Iran very fascinating. I follow it. There have been people that question the government there, but they keep saying nobody questions the government. Everybody goes along with it. But there are people that don't, like the younger people under 40. They grew up under this regime and they hate it. And they actually, like, I'm talking more about the city dwellers, maybe not in the countryside, but people who went to school and are more urbane. You're more likely to find conservative Muslim people in, like, let's say Cairo, Egypt, than you would in Tehran. And that's just...
I don't think that any of us really assumed everybody was religious or everybody agreed with the regime.
Yeah.
And I think we always knew that most of the people had that forced on them. So the question is, how much can they get away with doing, living their own lives? By the way, can you lower the way the camera looks at you? Because I can see so much of your head. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I just earlier it was like that. Sorry. But I'm not saying everybody, and I'm not saying like most people that know a little bit more about the Middle East, but there just does seem, I don't know, there's this narrative that we're always talking about their government, and it just seems like we kind of just lump Iran. Like, well, for instance, like Ron Paul kept saying a few years back, Iran doesn't want to create a nuclear weapon. They actually want to take part in nuclear talks. Their nuclear weapons or a nuclear program was more just for research for energy. And I think Ron Paul knew more about that than the average, maybe American statesman, in my opinion,
Yeah. The other thing that you mentioned that I think is interesting is that you can remain single and have more rights that way.
In Iran, yes, you could, because if you get married, you're basically going to be like the steward of your husband. But in Tehran, like, women can, if you're educated, if you're from a middle class family, you can have a job and you can have your own money. And there's actually a lot of men, they go on, because I watch a lot of Iranian documentaries and I read the comments, and there are these men complaining in Tehran, well, Tehran is a men-hating paradise and women won't marry me. Like, there are men that go on YouTube and they'll say that in the comments, and I don't think they're all making this up,
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting because it's also an answer to the feminist critique. For instance, did we need an amendment to the Constitution to allow women to vote? Well, back in New Jersey, back in the day, a long, long time ago, right after the United States became a free nation, and after the passage of the Constitution. In New Jersey, women could vote if they were not married, just as Black people could vote as long as they were not slaves. And there were many Black people who were not slaves. There were women who owned property and they were not married. They could vote. So it was kind of a choice. You could decide, I want to be my own person and not get married. And then you had all the civil liberties.
I guess I'm kind of okay on this one. I don't want like lots of amendments added to the Constitution just for things like, oh, to give legislators a pay raise. That I don't want. However, just in my view, I don't think we should have slavery. I do think, this is just my view, I do think everybody that's a citizen should have the right to vote. And that's just my take. But when it comes to the modern feminist movement, like of the 70s, I don't agree with that one as much. Like the whole equal pay thing, that I'm not as much on board with. But I do like support the suffragettes. Like I can see the need for it in my view, but I think it's gone so far the other way. That's kind of my take on it. I think it's going,
here's what my problem is. What under coverture, now coverture is another way of talking about property under marriage, you know. So under coverture, under the English common law, once you married, then all of your property was together and you weren't really separate people. And so the question is, if you're not going to be separate people, are you going to have two heads or just one head? So what happens right now is men and women get married all the time. They get divorced all the time. Once they get married, they can get each other into debt. You know,
for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Each of them has the right to borrow money now. And it used to be, okay, if a married woman wanted to borrow money, her husband had to come along and sign. Otherwise, she couldn't. And the reason for that was so that families couldn't just, you know, it couldn't be brought into debt from either side. And so whichever one of the two spouses was, you know, not going to be in control, you know, not going to control his own urges to spend, that one can get the entire family into debt. So it made a certain amount of sense for each family, you know, in marriage to have one head of the family. Now, I'm not saying the head of the family has to be the man, okay? I'm saying in some families, we all know that there are families where the woman is
more running the show,
Yeah. So sometimes the woman is wearing the pants or the hat or whatever it is that makes that person the head of the household. Sometimes the man is. But once you allow each of them to vote, what they end up doing is they end up canceling each other's votes every time they disagree with each other about something. And so they're acting as a really useless unit. You know, the whole marriage thing is useless. They might as well not be married. But in terms of getting each other into debt, you know, people get away from marriage. They even get divorced and they're carrying debt that it really wasn't they who agreed to it. You know, it was the other person.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say, yeah, that was really sexist that they always assumed the head of the family was the husband and not the wife, or that the head of the family was the man. But to go from this to say that each person in the family was equal to each other person and to allow them, you know, so if the husband has a particular financial interest, let's say he has a business, his wife can vote against it because she believes that that business is not good. You know what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying. I guess, okay, on the economic side, I don't think people should have to carry the debt. I don't think two people should get separate debts. when it comes to voting, though, I'm going to be like 100% honest with you. I think every U.S. citizen deserves the right to vote. That's just my take, but I do understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, where I'm coming from is because then this, you know, what we end up voting on is public debt. And
we do end up voting on public debt.
If people with no property are voting on getting other people who do have property into debt, it's a problem. And I see that in anything. So I think, you know, even Queen Elizabeth I, do you know why she didn't get married?
She wanted to maintain her throne and her property and her.
Yeah, so that doesn't mean that she remained a virgin forever. It doesn't mean that she didn't have any. It just meant that if she wanted to be in control of her life, she just didn't get married. Which this is choice, you know.
I'm like, I do think, not getting married does give you more control over your life, whether you be a man or a woman. I guess just my only take is I'm not really 100% on board with like saying, well, now we shouldn't give votes to people. I think that the debt thing could solve itself, though. Like, let's say we just stop having all these public welfare programs that we finance.
But how are we going to stop? Because you have to ask yourself, how do we get here? We got here a little bit at a time by giving the vote to more and more and more people. And I'm not racist and I am not sexist. It's not.
I don't think that.
Yeah, I don't think it should go by your gender, sex, whatever. And I don't think it should go by the color of your skin or your ethnicity or your religion or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if everybody gets to vote, including, you know, the people who would benefit from the extra spending by the government, you know, and if they outnumber eventually the people who are fiscally responsible, then it's pretty much inevitable that we'll be in exactly the situation that we're in right now. So that's why I mentioned that.
I get that. Like, let me just put it this way. I just don't think we're ever going to have people on board with saying, well, certain people should be able to vote because they're fiscally responsible, right? I think I do get what you're saying. I think we just need to find another way of, we can let everybody have a vote, but we need to like show people that we can't be using votes to create legislation that's going to like take away the public funding legislation. We could do that. Take away the wars, take away the wall, like make government more minimalistic. What about that? You know?
Well, I mean, what I would say is, like, for instance, and you and I are both single, so if I were talking to a married woman, I would be afraid to tell her this. But
no, you can tell me
you're single.
I'm listening to you. Like, I don't care. This is your opinion. I'm just my opinion.
You're right, but here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying take away the vote. I'm just saying if you're consolidating your family, if you're going to have the tax deductions of a married couple, you know, the benefits of being a married couple. There are some benefits, okay? It's easier to raise a family, okay? Okay, so there are a lot of good things about that, and that's fine. But if you're going to have those benefits, why not just say, okay, the entire family gets one vote. You guys figure out who's going to cast that vote.
Oh, I kind of see what you're saying. Like maybe instead of giving everybody a plurality where they have more, like they get more benefits, then they only get one vote instead of everybody can't.
They have to agree on it. So
that might be fair. Like that kind of makes sense because economically they get more benefits. Like, well, for instance, do single parents get like a $5,000 tax return?
Single parents can be a head of household if they are, in fact, the sole support of a child. Yeah.
But what I was trying, like, because I don't know as much about the tax code, but what I was wondering is a few years back when they were giving all those benefits, like I've heard they took some of that away. Is that true that people aren't getting as much as they once did in tax credits for having children? Is that true?
You're talking about the tax credits. Oh yeah. That's by the way, just on earned income. So if you're like, I've been a single parent for quite a while, but I did not have the earned income a lot of the time. I had investment income, and those credits don't go for investment income. So there was that.
Not fair. Like, why is it only for earned income? That's interesting. See.
Yeah. So the tax code is really complicated and convoluted, but that was just something to mention about why there should be a benefit to being single. There should be there's also benefit to being married.
For sure. Yeah. People that are married, they get a lot of benefits, I'm sure.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, if you are going to join your fortunes together and have those benefits, then maybe you should share a vote, and that would also make a certain difference.
I kind of see what you're saying, because economically, fiscally, that could make people more accountable as opposed to just giving it. Yeah, I can kind of see what you're talking about now. You know, another thing though that bothers me about this whole feminism thing and single thing, like a lot of women, because I'm talking about modern feminism, which I think is going a little too far. They are supposedly like, women are being mistreated, blah, 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 but all of them are married or they're in these solid relationships, whereas a lot of women who don't want feminism to go that far, they're single. I just don't get that. That's another thing I've always thought too.
Yeah. No, it's kind of interesting that the most feminist of feminists are usually married to some guy and have that, support system.
Yeah, and they kind of benefit from that. I mean, I don't really care. Like, that's fine. That's great that you meet people, but I don't know. Like, yeah, you get a benefit from being in marriage. I do see what you're talking about. That's good that you shared that point with me, Aya, because I never really thought about it that way. Right. That's a good point.
Yeah, back in ancient times, when the women of Sparta, would send their men off to war, that they would run the show while the men were away. When the men came back and they had to vote, each man would cast one vote. But do you know what? They pretty much did what their wives told them to vote for. So it's not as awful as you might think.
I don't even think it always is, because there was this island, in Malaysia, where they said, okay, the men all had to go work, but the women basically, like, they ran the show. Like, basically, the men would come back for like 2 weeks during the year, and the woman would kind of preen over him, blah, 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 treat him well. But then once the 2 weeks were coming to an end, they were like, you need to go now. You need to go back to work so you can make money to send back to us. And the women were kind of like, oh, they're running their households. The men are sending the money back. And this was in Malaysia, by the way, which is a majority, and they were Muslim too. So I thought that was interesting. So that's kind of interesting, like the different, but more Malaysian culture thing.
Yeah, no, I heard that in Iran, once within the safety of the family, you don't go out into the street and do that.
Yeah.
Within the safety of the family, there are many matriarchs. So.
Yeah, there are. It's interesting though, when it comes to like Muslim culture, just to touch on this a bit, a lot of Muslims complain it's like the Saudi Wahhabi culture that's being exported. Like, before, you always had like these more open viewpoints, but then people go study in Saudi on a scholarship and they come back with these more narrow viewpoints, and it's more of like a Saudi Wahhabi problem, like, not, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. No, I'm a libertarian. I think we should have absolute freedom in terms of our personal liberty. I think we should have, which includes that if we want to join a sect of some sort that is very narrow, that's okay. We have the right to do that, but we just don't have the right to force that on other people.
I guess I don't want to get overly political here, but lately, one thing I think we don't really talk about, though, that we should address is like, okay, a lot of liberal people say, well, we need to be very accepting of Islam, but there is this group of people like the ex-Muslims, atheists of North America. Have you heard about them?
No, I haven't.
They do a lot of videos, okay? So even here in Canada and North America, you have people like young women, they don't want to wear a headscarf, but because their family tells them that they have to do it, and they're living here in the States. But recently we have like all these liberal people saying, well, Islam is very tolerant and we should like praise them. But within Islam, sometimes you have families who are telling women that they have to wear the headscarf. So these Muslim people, like women that leave Islam, are doing videos about it, and they're being called like hate mongers because they're talking about some of the drawbacks in certain forms of Islam. Like when I was talking about Video Vids recently, he left Islam and he became an atheist, and he gets a lot of hate, by the way, just because he points out, well, there are certain problems with like really extreme Islam. Like, for instance, a woman is only worth half of a man. Like, their testimony in court is literally like the woman could say the same thing as a man, but her testimony is only worth half.
Yeah. No, I don't get me wrong. I would not want to live in any country where that's the case.
But we're not allowed to even mention it. I guess I don't want to go really political here, but there are people, they become atheists and they're shunned from their family, or they can't in like certain countries, like in certain secular Muslim countries like Egypt, you know, if you become an atheist, you can't say it in public because you could be ostracized, you could lose your job, like all sorts of things could happen to you. So you have to pretend to be a Muslim.
I know. Here we don't have to pretend that in our personal lives, but anybody who wants to run for office, let's be real, Julia, when was the last time an avowed atheist ran for office besides Austin Peterson?
Oh, you're right. That's kind of true. We're kind of the same.
And even he has to sort of notch it down and say, well, I'm an agnostic, which is okay, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's kind of the whole Abrahamic theme, I guess. We all have that in the Abrahamic religions, I guess.
I think Aaron Burr, and again, he wasn't one of those militant atheists who going around, oh, I don't believe in God, and no, you know, he wasn't bothering other people and he wasn't telling other people what to believe, because he really was an American and he believed in minding your own business. And but at least he admitted that he had his doubts about that.
See, that's good. And actually too, like, well, I heard Thomas Jefferson, like, he was a creationist. He did have a belief in God, but recently, like, they're trying to make him seem more religious than he was. Like, I've read of that as well.
Yeah. Well, there are so many problems with Thomas Jefferson. That
he has a lot. I'm not a big fan. I'm not like pro Jefferson. I'm just saying in general, I don't think the founding fathers were as pious as people would like them to believe, you know?
Yeah, no, they weren't. He was a deist, really. A lot of them were. Franklin was a deist.
Yeah, exactly. Like the deist, like kind of like, well, what the Unitarian Church was until now. I've looked at it. It's kind of hoo. Like now it's just like you can come and do whatever you want here. But back in the day, a lot of them were essentially Unitarian deists is what they were.
Yeah. And all of that is fine. And if you're very religious, that's also fine.
Yeah, it's fine, of course.
Yeah, as long as people don't try to force themselves on other people, I think it's all
like fine. How do I explain? Like I guess I'm nominally Christian. I don't go to church all the time, but I do have a Christian worldview. However, I just don't like when they tell anybody that they need to be a certain faith to run for office. I don't like that, of course. And that's true here. We do have people, like I think Obama like played down his religion a lot when he was running for office. Remember, he was going to that controversial church with that preacher who said the things people didn't like. So then all of a sudden he's like, I'm distancing myself from this church, but he attended it for 20 years. So how did it all of a sudden like, oh, I'm not part of it anymore?
Well, a lot of people believed he wasn't because they thought he was Muslim. So
that's another thing too, but he wasn't even, you know where that came from, by the way?
No, I have no idea.
I'll tell you where that came from. He did an interview. People misspeak all the time. And he accidentally said my Christian faith. Like he was just talking and he just made a blunder. So now everybody says he's a Muslim because he said that in some interview.
Okay, well, I'm just not even going to go in there. So
no, that's where a lot of that came from. Like I think people thought, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that really we should just stop asking people about their faith unless they want to share it.
If they want to share it, that's fine. Another thing too, like I don't care if somebody shares their faith with me. that doesn't bother me. I think we can also go the other way where we get really down on people who want to share their faith, as long as they're not going into like, I don't know, a private business and dispersing like flyers. Like if somebody's on a public, well, let me ask you this: like if somebody's on a public street and they're handing out religious tracts, does that bother you? I don't really care. I just don't.
I mean, you know, if they're too bossy and they insist I have to take one, then I feel a little uncomfortable. But if they offer me one, I can take it or not a problem.
Well, there was this, the only reason I asked is because I remember years ago, I used to substitute teach, and this lady, she called the school because she was really mad because this Christian group was handing out some information, and the office had to say, are they on school property? And they were like, no, they're in the street. She goes, well, then there you go. Just walk away. You know?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't mean to make this overly politically cool because we have other topics that we wanted to talk about.
One more thing to share about that is I used to actually enjoy receiving very colorful, beautiful printed books from the Hare Krishnas at the airport. I never turned those down because those were so great. And if you're trying to study Sanskrit, they're a wonderful resource.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. I never would have thought about that. That's kind of cool.
But I haven't seen the Hare Krishnas in a long time. Did something happen to them?
I think what it is they had some sort of controversy. I didn't follow it deeply, so I think a lot of people fell out with them. Like, okay, like now, like you know how everybody's big on criticizing Scientology all of a sudden, and that's becoming But by the way, like they were doing these things forever. Like they had, I don't really care what any Scientologist thinks about me because I don't have any problem with them. But my dad worked on some of their electricity up in their little compound in Arrowhead. And we always knew they had some interesting light installations. Like we knew that about them. But they were also, they paid people pretty well. So I don't know, like people voluntarily go to be in that group. So I think like these things go in cycles where people, you know what I'm saying? Like you have different groups that come in cycles, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it's like fashion, you know, sometimes one thing is very fashionable and that people bend over backwards to not be offended by somebody's weird behavior that it comes from their religion. And then other times people become much less tolerant.
Yeah, and just in general, I don't care what anybody's worldview is. They can be any religion or non-religion that they want to be. I just don't feel like people should feel like they have to be a certain thing. Like I think you should have the liberty to be what you want to be.
Right, absolutely.
So I don't seem like I'm too preachy or being hard on any group.
No,
not my intent.
Yeah, I understand. That's fine. And of course, it's interesting and intriguing to learn about somebody who grows up in under a repressive regime and yet still manages to find freedom.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like the main part of the story, and I think this is true for all the stories. Like we think, well, look at the women that came west. Like a lot of them were really strong women. They may have been married, but they were the ones that were keeping the house together, like and doing everything. Like their husband may be off working and they're chopping wood, they're like tending the animals, they're cleaning the house, like they're doing everything. Do you think, like in general, nowadays with any of us, like how many of us could be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna just run a homestead now? Like I think
no, I really don't know. Actually, that Chinese woman, I think her name is Li Zi.
Yeah.
Do you? I sent you one of her videos, right?
I like her video. It was very calming. Enjoy it.
And she does everything. She makes furniture. She creates dyes to dye cloth. She takes wool and she can spin it.
Wow.
She cooks, obviously she cooks. And it's like she's living out there in the countryside. I don't know where exactly in China that is. And she's living with her grandmother. She's not married. And apparently she's an orphan. So she has a grandmother, but no parents. And so she seems to be doing everything.
That's really interesting. And another thing, like, I don't know her situation. And maybe she definitely is an orphan. But another thing that's interesting about her situation, or just other people in China, is I wonder, you know how sometimes women, they can only have one child and the man can only have one child. So I don't know in her case, but I wonder sometimes, did they maybe have another child and the parents couldn't raise it, so the grandparent, I don't know. I'm just curious about that.
I don't know. I don't think that that's the case, because if they did have a second child, I think they were forced to give it up.
Yeah, but maybe she is an orphan in this case. I'm just curious. Like, I don't know why that pops in my mind,
but now they can have two, I think.
Oh yeah, it has increased, right? I did watch a documentary, by the way, recently. It might tie in a little bit with this. It's a little bit of a different perspective. It was these two Chinese twins. This Swedish family had went to China to adopt a child, a girl, and an American family went to China to adopt a girl, and they both happened to buy a gingham dress for the girls. And they both happened to have dressed the girls in the same dress. So anyway, there was a problem with one of the Swedish couples. Like, the husband was ill at the hotel and he couldn't come to sign the paperwork, but the Chinese official said he had to come. So the Swedish woman had to wait for her husband to come. So the rest of the Swedish group left, and now the American group is coming, okay? And one of the Americans had a little girl also dressed in a gingham dress, but the woman kept looking at the little girl, and she kept looking at her little girl, and she noticed something, that they looked exactly alike.
Wow.
So they asked the people at the adoption agency, are these twins? And they said, no, they're not twins. They just happen to look alike. But they knew, like, just by looking at them, they looked exactly alike. They were like, no, they have to be twins. So the Swedish couple and the American couple remained in contact with each other over the years. And this documentary shows the girls growing up, one in Sweden, one in America. The American one, she's more outgoing. She does pageants. I think she does like music lessons and things like that. The Swedish girl, she lives more of a country life because they're in this little village. And her favorite thing to do is just walk around the countryside in the snow and go play with her mouse. She has a pet mouse that she adopted. So they meet like every once in a while. And in the documentary, during that summer, the American girl comes to Sweden, and she gets to finally, for the first time in her life, go off and just play without adults watching her, because Sweden's safe and they're riding bikes. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. We're riding bikes. So they finally do a DNA test, and they do determine that both the twins were actually biological twins. So it's just kind of an interesting story. Like, they're both adopted from China, and just this chance encounter with the Swedish mom having to stay behind because her husband was sick at the hotel made it where she saw the American woman who just happened to buy the same dress. It just seems like too many coincidences. And it was a really interesting little documentary.
Wow. It does sound interesting. They should, I think that would make a great fictional movie if they just change it a little and, you know.
Yeah, and you might like it too because it talks about language, because the Swedish girl, she can speak English and Swedish, of course, and the American girl, she can only speak English, so the Swedish girl has to speak. It's kind of interesting because it does deal with language. You might like it.
Yeah, I'm sure I would.
Yeah, so I just kind of thought about that because you were mentioning that Chinese woman, but not to go off topic, but it was a really nice little documentary.
Yeah, no, I believe that women can do anything, especially in a situation where they have to. And certainly frontier situations call for that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's pretty neat though. Like, about her channel, I do want to watch more of it, but I think your fire video is kind of interesting too. I liked watching it.
Thank you. Well, I'm not old-fashioned like that, lady. But I am slightly behind, say, the hiding in my room guy, the one who married a woman in Japan, because he used this electric lighter to light his fires. So I'm in between. I use matches.
That's fine. You know what I tried to do as a kid? Gosh, they were like, you can make a fire with a stick and a stone. So I tried and I never could. But then I found out later you have to have a flint rock. So I would make a special type of stone, but I've always wanted to, in the mountains, like, not make a fire just for fun, like in a fireplace, okay, Like I want to get a piece of wood and I want to find some sort of rock and make a fire to light. Like that had always been a goal of mine. But I need to research it, right, to do it, of course.
You know, Kanzi the bonobo was taught how to start a fire, I believe, the old-fashioned way. But I did, you know, Bo is not a bonobo, he's a chimp. And I was just wanting to see if he could just light a fire with a match, but he didn't want to.
That's okay. Maybe he just doesn't like the sensation of the heat and that's fine. He's more cautious, I think.
Right. It's good to be cautious sometimes.
Oh yeah, by the way, I was also I was going to share that I found this really nice little coffee shop. Like there's this coffee shop, it's called Augie's. I don't have a problem with Starbucks. Some people really don't like Starbucks. Like I don't know why. I really like coffee. I'm a big coffee drinker. Do you know that about me, I guess?
Yeah, I like coffee too.
And I do make it at home, but when I'm out now, like sometimes I'm not at home, so I can't always make coffee and I want to drink coffee, so I'll go to Starbucks. But I actually like Augie's coffee a little bit better because they have other options. And I got the Americano. Maybe I'll get a different one next time. But what I really liked was I found this one. It was near market night, and it had this really cool view of the trees, this high-rise bank, and just the flag next to it. And it was just like the most interesting view because it had been raining on and off. So it was slightly overcast with the lights, and I just love the view from this coffee shop. It was kind of neat, the ambiance there.
You should do a live stream over there. Do they have like free internet?
I think that they do, and I probably could. Okay, I wanted to do a live stream at a coffee shop, and I could at this one. They have an outside area. It was so cute. It was like, it seemed more secluded too. Some people were like, oh no, should we be here? Because I think they weren't buying coffee. They were just sitting there because of market night. But it seems like it's not real busy on a night when there's no market night. Like even for being market night, it was funny because you had the market night, but you kind of had to look to see that they were behind where the bank was, like they're behind these bushes. It was interesting. So yeah, I might want to try doing that.
Okay. Well, I will definitely watch. So if you do it on your channel, I'll watch it on your channel. But
yeah,
sometime it might be nice to do it. You know, maybe someday I'll figure out how to do it right here at Orchard House outside when the weather is nice.
Yeah, definitely. I've been wanting to get like a laptop too. I just haven't done that yet. I still need to work on that. I keep wanting to get, I don't know what kind, but just some type of a laptop where I can take it with me and be more mobile like that. Because my phone, like I can live stream from my phone, but my complaint about my phone is, can you get into your Google Hangout control from your phone?
I don't think so. I don't know how.
Like I've tried on multiple occasions and I don't see why it's so difficult. I feel like YouTube should make that easier. Like that's my main complaint. Can't they just have an app that would let us do that? So if we wanted to live stream from our phone, we could do a Google Hangout from our phone.
Yeah, I would love that. By the way, I got something from Kate Gladstone, you know, and she's our guest tonight on their channel. So let me look and see what she wrote because.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. It was a while ago, but. Oh, she says her associate says he is able to make a table-sized model and he should be able to make letters or symbols that have freestanding parts such as the Hebrew letters Hey or Kuf or the English lowercase letters I and J. You know how there's like the little dot, and they could make like a statue, a freestanding one with those things where the I has the thing on top of it and it's like floating in the air.
That's cool.
Wow. And okay, and she's going to have the URL and the ordering information. I'm just going to, you know, do a thumbs up on that. Just so
nice. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, I was talking to her earlier in the teaser and I was asking her about that because it's interesting. She has different sizes of initials that are either 3D or 2D. Mm-hmm. And the 3D ones can be a little bit cumbersome, but if they make a freestanding thing, can you imagine? It could be like a paperweight or a decoration on your coffee table.
That would be awesome. Like, I think a lot of people would like that. I love this 3D printing, like the possibilities of what you could do with it, like for decorative purposes, for utilitarian, but more for decorative purposes. Like, I would like to have a 3D printer.
Yeah, well, I guess we all will someday in the future, but I'm not rushing toward it. Here's my feeling about, about progress.
Yeah.
I'm not against progress. Obviously, I learned how to use a computer and I'm, doing these live streams. So I'm obviously not.
You're very adept at it too. Like everybody acknowledges that, you're good at it.
Oh, well, I don't know about that. But the thing is, I think that whatever level of technology we get to, that's not going to make our life, that's not the thing that's going to make our life better.
No, it doesn't. It does the opposite, actually. Let's be honest. It does the opposite.
Right. So I like to write. I like to be creative. I know that you do too.
Yeah, definitely.
But, just the invention of the alphabet was enough to be able to do that.
For sure.
And yeah, the printing press is a nice invention too, so that we can mass produce things. I feel as if the acceleration of progress in technology is not necessarily giving us a better life. So I'm not saying let's do away with anything that we've discovered, but let's not publicly fund any more of that,
Yeah, well, I think private industry does. I used to be of the opinion, oh, well, the public sector can be really good at coming up with these programs, but actually a lot of privately funded things that people created on their own were pretty darn amazing. Like one of the men that was, I guess, convicted in the Salem witch trials, he was a bit of a tinkerer, and he made like an alarm clock of some sorts to wake himself up to get up early to do all his chores. And he did that back in like the 1690s. So people can privately create things. We don't need to have a public funding of technology. One of the drawbacks on technology that I see in life, I think it's impersonal. There's no line between like your work and your home life as much anymore. Like now with a cell phone, like you are expected to do like, well, even if you own a small business, like you're expected to respond quickly. Like, I don't know. Do you ever look at Facebook and it says like, how fast do you respond to people who send you messages on your Facebook page? Do you ever get those notifications?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about, I don't know if you saw that video about how I responded to the guy in India. I was in bed and half asleep and he asked me to explain this poem to him, It was on my Kipling Facebook page. And, and I had such a good rating about responding quickly. And I felt bad about not responding, but I wasn't going to sit there and read the poem, word for word. So I just told him in broad strokes what that means.
Yeah.
And it was about progressivism, it's as old as time and it's not very helpful. So yeah, I had that experience where how did they know how to make my phone beep so that I would know this guy in India was asking me a question about
it's because you have the Facebook notification on. I used to get criticized. No, your phone's beeping all night. So I turned off a lot of my notifications so my phone doesn't beep anymore. Like you still get the notification, but you can go into your settings and tell it not to do it. So you don't get the beep. If you're interested, I don't know. That's up to you though. If you wanted to continue beeping, then you can. But yeah.
It just happens once in a blue moon. If it happened all the time, I would definitely turn it
on.
Well,
I had a problem a few years ago when I was blogging a little bit more. I had all my notifications on and my phone was beeping way too much. So that was my own problem. But anyway, also too, I feel like the line is blurred. Like, okay, let's say you're in a relationship or you're getting to know someone. And I'll tell you one thing I regret is text messaging people who really didn't like me. that's a downside to technology. Like if there was no smartphone, I wouldn't have been able to do that. And I regret that because I thought, well, I want to ask this somebody something, but I should have just like not. I should have been like, don't do it, Julia. But I have this bad tendency, like when I want to know something, and because the cell phone's right here, I ask them. And I wish I never would have done that, you know? And I guess
I don't think you have to regret that. I mean, you had a question, you asked it, that's it.
yeah, I guess, but I don't know. Like, I feel like, well, maybe it'd be better in 1985 where you couldn't text somebody and you just see what happens in life, you know? Because you're going to get the same results anyway. I do kind of see the drawbacks sometimes. Like, I like texting, but I can see how it can control our lives a bit. Do you know what I'm kind of saying? Or like expedite?
Yeah. But, you know, before the telephone, before everybody had a phone, and see, my parents still remember a time when in Israel, not everybody had a phone. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to go visit your friends, you didn't feel bad about just knocking on their door and saying, hey, are you free? You want to do something? And if they weren't home, well, nobody answered. And if they weren't free, they would say no, because I have to do this. And that was it. But then as soon as everybody got a phone, you couldn't do that anymore.
I know, I've heard that too, but okay, I feel like that's another thing. Like, I've never had a problem if somebody knocked on my door and asked me if I wanted to do something. I would just be like, I can't do this. I guess maybe I'm slightly atypical this way. I was never offended if somebody didn't call me or invite me the specific way to do something. Like, do you know what I'm saying? I guess that's just me, though.
Yeah, but I mean, if I showed up at somebody's doorstep today, even somebody who knows me, not a stranger, and I said, hey, you want to do that? They would say, why didn't you text or call or something?
Yeah, they would. They'd be upset. They'd be very upset. But even now, like, I have a neighbor, like, sometimes, like, I just knock, because we've become good enough friends, like, I just knock on her door and I'm like, hi, do you want some books? But that's kind of rare. I guess you can't really do that with most people.
You can't do that with most people, even if you live in the same neighborhood. You have to let them know, because otherwise they'll feel shocked and they'll think you're stalking them or something.
I guess so. Like, I guess that's the case. Like, I don't know. Well, she likes me to come by because I bring her things or I talk to her. So it's a little bit different in this case, I guess. But I don't do that with most people. As a disclosure, I don't go knocking on how you doing?
Yeah, but I mean, nowadays, the young people, the much younger than me people, they will not use the doorbell. There's no reason to use a doorbell anymore because they will text and say, I am just outside the door.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, I have noticed that too. Like, we were noticing, like, sometimes people wouldn't knock on the doorbell and we were getting texts. That's true. You're right.
Yeah. So every time something new is invented, it takes the place of something old.
Yeah.
And so it's not really progress. It's just we're going around in a circle.
Yeah, in a way. And then even like with the text message thing, like supposedly, well, this is a new big technology, but somebody said, but we're still taking the time like to write things. It's not like we stopped like we're still, and sometimes it takes longer to text somebody something than if you just pick up the phone and call them. But apparently some people now get offended if you call them to say something more quickly than it would take to text them. Like, what is up with that? I don't get it. Like, isn't it more efficient just to call someone and say, hi, how are you doing? To ask them if they want to go somewhere? Whereas if you're taking 20 minutes to write the same text, I don't know. Like, but apparently you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to text them first.
You have to text first and get permission to call. And then you have to get permission about what you're going to talk about, because God forbid that you should talk about something that person doesn't want to talk about.
How about we do another live stream sometime? I don't know if you're keen on this, just about, well, maybe we need to, like, okay, you can call somebody, but maybe we need to get so not caught up in all these silly rules about how to text people. I don't know. That might be an interesting topic. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that would be a great topic for our next live stream, just you and I.
Okay, sounds good. So I probably should let you get going because I know Bo's probably wondering like what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's a busy day, but I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, it was fun, like just going off all these topics, and I feel like a little bit of a chatty Cathy. But I was interested in hearing about that movie you're watching and just about the family having a vote. That I had never thought about it that way. It does make sense to me now that you described it to me that way. I do get what it has a lot of impact. I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you tonight with Kate Gladstone.
Okay. Have a good afternoon, Aya.